Hey friends, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It's one of the most powerful ways you can help the channel grow. Every like, comment, and share that you leave in the first few hours of a video tells YouTube that our stories are worth pushing to a bigger audience. With your support, I know we can get to 25,000 subscribers by Halloween. Remember, we never have ads in the middle of our stories. And don't forget, if you want to rep The Darkest Hour, visit thedarkesthourYT.com for exclusive merch you won't find anywhere else. Thanks for being part of this journey. Now, on with the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. Some say the world we see is only half of what exists, that just beyond our vision, another realm hums quietly, filled with eyes that never close. It's in the chill that creeps through your bones when no wind is blowing, in the flicker of light that should fade, but doesn't. Tonight, we open that invisible curtain, step into the places where shadows live, where objects remember, and where the dead refuse to be forgotten. On this side of things, the truth is rarely comforting. So, let's get started, shall we? Me and my partner have been looking to buy a house. Anyone going through that process right now knows what I mean when I say the market is sparse. But I'm not here to complain about the housing crisis that's objectively happening right now. Our realtor's name is Jeff. He's a youngster with fiery red hair. He was recommended to us by a friend, and for the most part, he's been able to show us houses in our feasibility range, but we haven't found one yet. I'm getting nervous that our expectations of what the one would look like have deteriorated down to basic necessities. We don't need it to be an area with a good school district, and we're willing to downsize, but we have to draw the line somewhere. Last week, all of us, my husband Dennis, me, and Jeff, all found a new line, an unexpected expectation line that none of us could argue about. No, it's not about the plumbing or the distance from train tracks. But this 4-word question is now pivotal, and the first question that Jeff asks the homeowners before we come visit. He says, "Hi, my name is Jeff from blah blah realty company. Is your house haunted?" No joke, because what we went through last weekend was probably the scariest horror movie thing that I've ever been through. I think it was the scariest thing that anyone had experienced, because we all reacted the same. Well, first off, the house that he took us to was beautiful. It was right off 3rd Street, but tucked back far enough away where you couldn't even hear the traffic on 3rd. It was a big white house with 2 pillars in front, 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. More space than we could ever need, but miraculously, it was in our price range. You could say the red flags began popping up the moment we all stood on the front patio. There was a feeling in my stomach I couldn't quite describe, but Dennis explained it perfectly, because as we discussed it later, he had the same pit sitting deep in his stomach, like we were entering a place we weren't welcome. First, Jeff's keys wouldn't work on the door. It was the weirdest thing because they were the right keys. They fit in the lock and easily turned. But putting pressure on the door didn't open it. Jeff had to use a little muscle and put his shoulder into the door for it to open with the loudest, unoiled creak a door hinge could ever emit. We all laughed at the sound it made. When we got in there, Jeff turned on a few lights. It was obvious this house hadn't been lived in for some time. The house was empty as could be. Some of the other houses that we visited were decorated with some sort of furniture to give off more of an inviting feel. This house had none of that. Bare bones. I don't remember if the windows even had curtains. I know the ones in the downstairs living room didn't, because while Dennis and I were looking through the downstairs rooms, we heard Jeff let out a quick, suppressed scream, like he'd seen a rat scurry across the floor. I went to go check on him, asked if anything was wrong. Trying to stay professional, Jeff laughed uncontrollably and said, "Oh, I thought I saw someone standing out there," while he points outside. Then he says, "But it must have just been your reflection coming up behind me." I thought that was strange because he wouldn't have been able to see my reflection from the room I was in. I'd only come into the living room after he made the noise. I didn't challenge it, though. His comment honestly didn't creep me out there in the moment, because it was dark outside and with the lights on inside, the big windows just looked like dusty mirrors. When Dennis walked out, on the same set of windows, he noticed that there were tiny child handprints in the dust. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and turned on the flashlight to get a better look. He pointed it down to the bottom of the window, where the first two handprints were, and then he started to raise the flashlight up, and we saw the imprinted pattern go all the way to the top of the glass, and presumably past it. Jeff was right next to us when we saw that, and he said that that kid must have been an acrobat. Yeah, something like that. I did not like seeing the kid prints in the dust. I whispered to Dennis that I didn't like the place, but we still hadn't toured upstairs. Jeff was feeling something weird too, because he started acting antsy, picking up his pace, walking us around the house, telling us all about its commodities. Then we went upstairs. The bedrooms were big, but there was nothing that could rejuvenate the overall essence of the house. Then, nearing the end of our tour upstairs, Jeff asks if we wanted to check out the attic. Apparently, it was spacious, and the original family made it a billiard room. I was already planning on saying hell no to this house, so I politely declined. Dennis agreed with me, and we all turned around to go back downstairs, but we heard this loud creak, the one from the front door again, and we all stopped in our tracks. Dennis and I looked at Jeff like this was probably more of his responsibility to see who'd just come in. He took baby steps to the stairs. His facial expression led me to believe that he hadn't planned on someone else joining us. Before he got to the railing, he said, "Hello? Hello?" His voice was shaking. Dennis pulled me close and we stood right where we were, in the upstairs hallway, while Jeff crept his way closer to the edge of the stairs. He said hello one more time before crouching down and looking to his right toward the front door. He quickly hops back up and says, "I don't know what that was. Front door's still closed." And then he goes, "Yeah, we're taught to lock the doors after we go inside, specifically for things like that." I did my best not to show it, but my blood pressure was through the roof watching this scrawny kid tiptoe like a cartoon character to the stairs. Then we heard a noise that sent us all barreling down the stairs and out the front door to Jeff's car. This time it was the unmistakable sound of pool balls cracking upstairs. Just one loud clack, ball on ball. Dennis almost took Jeff out going down the stairs. I felt bad watching him fumble for his keys trying to lock the door before bolting back to his car with us. He hit the car in reverse and I almost went through the windshield. My fault for not having my seatbelt on, but I recovered and we got out of there. All this being said, we're still looking for a home to buy. If you're selling and can guarantee your property's not infested with ghosts, please send me a message. Only serious inquiries. You get to a certain age and you figure out what you like. For me, it's high up places and quiet work. That's why when I retired from teaching high school shop, I took the volunteer gig with the Forest Service. I spent summers in a lookout tower on the spine of the Cascades, a little glass box 80 feet up, just me and the wideband radio. The silence up there isn't really silence. It's a texture of its own. It's the hum of the transformer, the rattle of the glass when the wind hits, the distant, steady rush of a stream 10 miles down the valley. And beneath all that, the radio static. A soft, low hiss that you don't hear. You just feel it in your teeth. That hiss is the baseline of the world. And I grew to love it. My job was to monitor emergency channels mostly. You listen for the distress codes, for the hikers who went off trail. But mostly you listen to nothing. Hours and days of the earth breathing, broken up by the occasional call from another lookout or a grumpy park ranger down in the valley. This one night, maybe halfway through July, the air felt thick and still. The kind of night where the stars are so bright that you feel that you could reach out and pluck them. I was half dozing in my chair, with my heavy foam headphones on, just basking in the hiss, when something broke it. It wasn't a human voice, not with a distress call, but with a song. It was like a little girl's voice, clear as spring water, singing a very old nursery rhyme, one about a willow branch and a silver needle. It sounded incredibly close, almost in the room with me, which was impossible. I was locked in, 30 miles from the nearest paved road. I snapped awake, reaching for the mic. Forest Service Lookout 47, I have an unsecured channel. Identify yourself, please. The singing didn't stop. It just kept going. Sweet, simple, filling my head. Then the second voice cut in. It was low, guttural, and so deep it felt less like a sound and more like a vibration passing through the bone. It was singing the exact same melody, though. It was completely off-key, warped, somehow backwards even. The two voices layered over each other, the sweet, clear child, and this wet, throaty sound that was wrong in every measure. The combined noise made the static scream, like the radio waves themselves were protesting the sound. I realized with a crushing, sickening certainty that the noise wasn't coming from the airwaves. It was being channeled through the headset, not by it. It was something in the woods, or maybe beneath them, using the equipment to gain access to my head. My hands flew up to rip the headset off, but I was too slow. Right as my fingers touched the foam, the little girl's voice stopped abruptly. The deep, rumbling voice stopped with her. And the silence that followed wasn't the natural silence I love. It was an echoing, held breath kind of silence. Then, crystal clear, right in the dead air of the empty channel, the little girl's voice said a simple, 3-word phrase. Not a question or a threat, just an observation. It's quiet now. I flung the headset across the room. It clattered against the far wall, sending a fresh burst of static across the cabin. I spent the rest of the night with my back wedged against the stove, listening to the glass rattle, waiting for the morning light to paint the trees. I never mentioned it in the log. I told the ranger that my radio had been acting up and that the unit needed maintenance. They replaced the whole system the next week. But when I'm driving down an empty road, alone sometimes, if I turn off my own car radio, I hear that brief, held breath silence before the engine noise comes back. I remember that little voice. in the silence that was out there. It's quiet now. I'm still not technically okay. I want to start there. I keep trying to logically explain what happened, but it just loops back on itself and makes me feel crazy, which is probably what it's supposed to do. This is back in college, maybe 4 years ago. I moved into this cheap place in a half-abandoned neighborhood on the south side of Buffalo. It was a second-floor walk-up, creaky floors, radiators that sounded like a drum solo, the whole bit. It was just a feeling at first, that vague, cold awareness that you are absolutely not alone. You know, like when you can feel a stare on your back. It was that, but constant, and always focused on the kitchen. The kitchen was the worst. It had this huge single-pane window overlooking a dead-end alley. Even with the blinds shut, standing in there felt like taking off your coat in a blizzard. I started leaving the radio on 24/7, trying to drown out that type of silence, but it didn't help. I was sleeping maybe 4 hours a night, waking up in a sweat, my whole body just bracing for something to happen. I'm a biology major. I don't believe in ghosts or hexes, but for a few weeks, logic starts to crumble when you're in that sleep-deprived state. I started doing stupid things, little ridiculous rituals that were supposed to make me feel safe. I drew this wonky compass rose on the back of the pantry door. I'd set my shoes by the front door facing out, convinced that if I ran, I needed to run fast. I even left the shower running for a night just because the sound of running water felt like a shield. Pathetic and a huge waste of water, I know. Then I remembered this old, awful movie about witches, how they couldn't cross a line of salt. It was such a goofy, desperate thought, but I went to the corner store, bought 3 huge containers of iodinized salt, and went to work. I lined the base of the front door, the sill of the bathroom window, and every single edge of that huge kitchen window. I packed the salt down with a flat-line butter knife. It was humiliating, but I did it. And then stillness for a week, maybe 10 days. The air in the apartment felt thinner, easier to breathe. The cold pressure on my back was gone. It was just an old, cheap apartment again. I thought, okay, it was all stress, lack of sleep. The salt thing was a placebo, and I'm fine now. Then I woke up that Tuesday morning, around 4 a.m., to this faint light. Not an external light like a street lamp. It was coming from the kitchen. It was this soft, internal glow, a low, milky white luminescence. I crawled out of bed, holding my breath, and peeked around the corner. The salt. The line that I'd carefully packed along the bottom of the kitchen windowsill was shining. And it wasn't just sitting there. It was moving. Slowly, gently. The individual crystals were rising a fraction of an inch from the wood, swirling like smoke in a windless room. A shimmering, silent upward current. It was all contained right over the line I'd drawn, contained by the glass. The light wasn't comforting. It wasn't warm. It felt like something being pressurized against the window, and the salt was the only thing holding it back. I thought I could hear, feel, a low humming vibration in the floorboards under my bare feet, like an idling engine. I stood there, staring at this impossible glow, and the swirling crystals, and that awful pressure came back, 1,000 times worse. It wasn't just watching me now. It felt like it was waiting for me to open the window, so the salt barrier could break and that white electric cold could flow in. I didn't call the police. I didn't grab my books. I just backed away slowly until I hit the closet where I kept my jacket and my keys. I threw my coat on, not even tying my shoes. I ran down those creaky stairs, and I drove 40 miles east to my sister's place without stopping. And I never stepped foot in that apartment again, not alone. I lost the deposit. I lost a lot of furniture. I lost the whole semester, frankly. But I know what I saw. I just don't know what it means or what it was. Was the salt holding something out, or was it keeping something in? Sometimes I still get that feeling that if I look closely at the floorboards, I'll see the faintest trace of glowing white powder that tracked out with me. I'm always paranoid that something came with me, but I guess it's been long enough to let that go. There's an old song that says, if you're gonna be dumb, you gotta be tough. And I don't think that's embodied anyone better than my friend Donnie. I don't gotta worry about him stumbling on this story and reading it because Donnie doesn't go on these kinds of radical pages. Dang, I'm even gonna have to denounce his title of my friend. Donnie's a giant man that I work with. He rides a motorcycle without a helmet because he doesn't want to fuck up his greased back thinning hair, and he harasses the female employees on a regular basis. He has no problem talking loudly about his weekend escapades with the male coworkers, who are both unimpressed and uncomfortable, maintaining their professional behavior while Donnie spouts off about the illegal pleasures he elicits. But today was different. Different enough for me to document it in some way because I really might be able to follow up on it depending how everything goes. So Donnie came into work late this morning. It was the first time that I'd seen his hair not combed to perfection. All of him looked swamped. It looked like he hadn't slept for days. I may be biased on my opinion of what he looked like because of what I was told, and that only came from one source. Nobody else seemed to notice Donnie's unprofessional attire, but a real friend of mine named Zelly works on the same floor as me, and when Donnie came in, he went straight to her desk and asked her to talk somewhere private. Zelly added that it wasn't a flirty request, desperate in an authentic way. So Zelly and him walked out of the office over to a private meeting room. I spied on them through the window, and at one point, it looked like he was going to take his shirt off. That's not what he was trying to do, though, and I'm glad I didn't storm in there. When it looked like they were getting ready to leave, I ran back to my desk. After they exited, he turned the other way and left the building again. And Zelly came back, making long, meaningful eye contact with me the whole time. She came over to sit at my desk. I asked what that was about. I'm told that Donnie misidentified her as Native American. Zelly's Italian, but she let him finish his thought before correcting him. Donnie tells her that he went out hunting over the weekend with a few of his friends. He got a deer in his crosshairs and took it down with one shot. But when he walked the 100 or so yards to the body, it had already decomposed. Same deer that he'd seen in the scope. The entry wound from the bullet was still warm, but the meat around it was cold, like the deer had been dead long before he'd shot it. Zelly says Donnie's eyes started to fill up like he was going to cry. He said that when he touched the deer's body, he felt an energy enter him. He couldn't explain it any more than that. He started to get overheated and sick, so his friends canceled their hunting plans to take him to the hospital. Doctors took blood samples, but nobody could help. Every night since then, including last night, he had paralyzing nightmares that he says aren't nightmares because he swears he's wide awake when he sees this tall man with a hunched back standing at the end of his bed. Donnie says that he's missing his lower jaw and that his eyes are all black. He's been showing up ever since he shot that deer, and he doesn't know how to make him stop. Unbuttoning his shirt, Donnie reveals a literal mark on his ribs, like someone had given him a slap of a lifetime. Zelly did admit that she thought the markings looked weird, skinny and long, almost like whip marks all extending from one wide pancake center point. I had her draw it on a piece of paper. It looked like a small frying pan with 5 long handles. Donnie winced when he lifted his shirt and told Zelly they're excruciatingly raw. The veins around the red area were all aggravated as well. She empathized with his pain because Zelly's a nice girl, but she also had to ask why he was showing her this. That's when he tells her that he's afraid there's a demon or something in his house. He thinks it's trying to possess him. Pointing to his head, Donnie claimed that he could feel it changing him inside. Thoughts that aren't his own entering his head without permission. He thinks because this demon's associated with nature that he needs a Native American shaman to help exorcise it. When Zelly told him that she was Italian, he almost broke down in tears, asking if she knew any Native Americans. Finally, she's like, "Donnie, you need to go get that checked out." He asks, "Does it look that bad?" And she tells him for sure it does. Zelly again had to re-describe the frying pan-sized bruise with even more vivid detail. Apparently, it was that crazy looking. Wild shit, right? Donnie didn't come back today. I'm curious if he'll be back this week or at all. The stuff he told Zelly about changing him inside, it really gave me a bad feeling. I told her to tell HR what happened, but I don't know if she did or not. I'm going to have to follow up on it tomorrow, but yeah, what do I do now? I've been an apartment property manager for a small complex for about 5 years now, and you do see all kinds of weird things. But this started with a perfectly normal email from a tenant, an older woman named Miss Pietersen, who was moving into a retirement home. She just wanted to know if we could dispose of a few old, heavy items that she didn't want to haul with her. One of them was a massive, ordinately carved oak mirror, the kind that takes 2 strong men just to lift. I told her that we couldn't officially do disposal, but I'd listed in the community classified section under our building newsletter for free. I snapped a quick photo of it in her empty living room. It was beautiful, honestly. Dark, heavy wood, maybe an antique. The glass was deeply smoked and cloudy with age. I took the photo for the listing. It just showed the mirror leaning against the wall of the vacant apartment. The listing ran for a week and no one bid. Too big, too heavy, I guess. So I took the listing down. The next day I had to go back to the unit to do a final walkthrough. Everything was spotless, except for the mirror still leaning against the far wall. I walked through the unit, taking notes, and then I stopped. I pulled out my phone to check my checklist, and I saw the photo of the mirror on my camera roll. But it wasn't the original photo. In the picture, the lighting was different. The apartment didn't look empty anymore. The mirror was still there, but reflected in the glass, faintly, was a narrow, dark hallway that I didn't recognize. It looked like it was taken on a different phone, too. The timestamp was from the day before, right when I took the original photo, but the file name was slightly off. I checked my phone's recently deleted folder. The original, clear photo of an empty room. It was there, waiting to be permanently deleted. This new photo, this reflection photo, was now the main copy. I was creeped out, but I'm rational. Maybe it was a cloud backup glitch. Maybe I accidentally downloaded an old stock photo. I deleted the corrupted image, took a new one of the empty room, and finished the walkthrough. I went home that night. When I scrolled through my phone's photos to show my wife the unit, the new uncorrupted photo was gone. In its place, again, was the same picture of the mirror, showing that dark, unidentifiable hallway. I tried to zoom in, but the reflection was just too murky. This went on for 3 days. Every time I took a new picture, the next day it would be overwritten with a new one. Same mirror, same dark hallway in the glass. On the 4th day, I got a text from a different tenant saying they were interested in the mirror I posted. I said I hadn't posted anything lately, asked if they were referring to the old one, but they insisted. It's right here in the community chat. He just posted it an hour ago. I opened the chat. There was my contact photo and a message I absolutely did not write. Mirror, beautiful, must go today, Mrs. Pietersen's old home. And below it was the picture. Not the picture of the mirror in the empty room. It was the picture of the mirror with that dark, reflective hallway. Only this time, it wasn't murky. It was crisp. And in the very back of the reflection, standing right at the end of the reflected hall, was the very faint, very tall, unmistakable shape of a man. I threw my phone down, drove back to the apartment, wrapped that mirror in a sheet, and dragged it to the dumpster. I couldn't, in a good conscience, hand that thing over to someone, but I also couldn't destroy it, so I left it there. The next day, the listing on the community chat was deleted, and the mirror was gone. I work alone, midnight to 8 a.m., as an access control technician, which is just a fancy name for watching empty lobbies on CCTV. The office building is dead silent, and my biggest threat is running out of charging cable length. This story centers on the South Annex fire door, a generic metal door at the end of a long, white, fluorescent-lit corridor that's only used for storage. The camera focused on it keeps doing this weird thing where it glitches out for a split second, maybe a tenth of a second, about 3 or 4 times an hour. I log it as a firmware bug. Whatever. Then the glitches start happening when I'm walking through that hallway for my rounds. During the flash, I see something. A figure standing right by the door. It's not a shadow, but a super clear, staticky snapshot of a tall, impossibly thin person in a dark suit. Just there. I initially figure it's a lighting artifact, or maybe I'm sleep-deprived as fuck and I need to drink more energy drinks. But then the figure starts moving within the glitch. It's never in the same place in the snapshot. Sometimes it's leaning, sometimes its head is tilted. The biggest change comes from when I realize the figure isn't just in the glitch. It causes the glitch. I start hearing faint, high-frequency digital whispers right before the flash, like corrupted audio files being played too fast. The whisper sounds like my name, but stretched and garbled. Everything peaks when I deliberately try to trigger the glitch by standing in front of the door with my phone camera running. I capture a flash, but my phone screen is just a wall of static. When I look up, the figure isn't in the glitch anymore. It's standing still in the hallway, and it's waiting for the next glitch to disappear. The final moment is the realization that the figure is only fully visible during the split-second failure of observation, and the whispers are the only part of it that can exist in continuous time. It's not the ghost that's glitched. It's my perception that's lagging behind, something that's always been there. What exactly it is, I'm not sure. I work in IT at a small university library, mostly dealing with network issues and busted printers. A few months ago, the head librarian called me to the basement archives because an old filing cabinet was stuck. Turns out it wasn't stuck. A big antique brass door knocker had fallen behind it. This wasn't shaped like a lion's head or anything regal. It was shaped like a human hand, maybe life-sized, with a heavy, thick brass ring clenched in the fist. It was strangely cold to the touch. The librarian didn't want it, so I took it home, planning to sell it on Etsy. I hung it on my office wall as a decoration while I waited for a free weekend to list it. Everything was fine until I started noticing things happening, specifically to my electronics, things that were plugged into the wall. It started with the phone charger. I'd plug in my phone, and it would charge to 80%, and then just stop. Then my laptop. It would randomly shut down, and when I restarted it, the battery would be completely drained, even though it was plugged in. I bought new cords, new surge protectors. Nothing worked. I noticed a pattern. Everything that failed, everything that died despite being plugged in, was in the same room as the brass hand knocker. I went into my office to work one night, and the overhead light flickered and died. I walked over to the outlet to see if the bulb was just loose, and that's when I saw something. The brass hand. It wasn't on the wall. It was sitting on my power strip. It was lying flat across the black plastic, perfectly covering the on and off switch with its brass palm. The green power light was off. I picked it up, feeling a wave of deep, unnerving cold when I did. I put it back on the wall hook, and the power strip immediately clicked back on, the light shining bright green. I convinced myself that it had simply fallen off the wall and onto the strip. But it escalated. I came home from work and I found every single wall outlet in my entire office, 8 of them, had something jammed into the top grounding hole. It wasn't metal. It was a tiny, dried-out, blackened piece of organic matter, like a piece of root or burnt twig, just enough to break the circuit. On my desk, the brass hand knocker was sitting on a little pile of these tiny black twigs. It had somehow unplugged the entire room from the electrical grid. I was honestly kind of terrified, but also weirdly compelled. I took the brass hand off the desk, carried it downstairs. I got a heavy-duty waterproof cooler, wrapped the hand in a trash bag, put it inside. I secured the cooler with 2 bungee cords. I felt a huge wave of relief. I went back upstairs, and for the first time in weeks, my laptop was fully charged. I woke up at 4 a.m. to a distinct, metallic knocking sound. It wasn't the door. It was coming from my basement. I walked down the stairs, and the sound was clear. Knock, 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 pause. Knock, knock, knock. It was coming from the laundry room. I flicked on the light. The waterproof cooler was lying on its side, the lid still secured by the bungee cords. But on the floor next to it, the brass ring. The big, thick ring that was meant to be clenched in the hand's fist. The ring had somehow been worked free of the brass hand. and it was banging rhythmically against the metal side of the washing machine, hitting the machine right on the spot where the power cord plugs into the back. I sold my house 2 weeks later. I left the cooler in the basement, still corded shut. I didn't open it. I don't know what it wanted, but I know it wasn't a spirit looking for connection. It was something that wanted to cut the connection. It wanted to make life around it dark and cold, just like it was. My name's Emma. If I told you that I once worked at a brothel, but I didn't work at a brothel, would you believe me? Well, believe it or not, it takes a lot to keep a legal brothel up to code. I did this for 3 years. Coming from a senior management position in another line of work, along with my skills in Excel, the bookkeeping was easy to do, and it paid a whole lot more than the company I was previously working for. If it wasn't for the money, I'd probably have overlooked the opportunity. Saying I worked at a brothel came with a stigma the paycheck just barely made me forget about. The fear about the stigma, though, was just my ego, because they ran that place with elegance and class. It was clean, and their clients were mostly high-end businessmen, musicians, and athletes. In my 3 years there, we only had one incident where Big Jim had to intervene. When I was there, we had a Big Jim and a Big Brandon and a Big Sam who rotated security. These large men were amazing at protecting our girls while they were there. But when they left our property, most of them lived much different lives. I'm speaking from personal experience that most of the women that worked there came from hard backgrounds. Sure, you'd get the occasional princess chasing a quick paycheck, but it wasn't as common. I'd met a girl when I first started working there. Her name was Greta, and it was her first week there. I think maybe her 3rd day. Greta had also been from Arizona, and we figured out after our first conversation that she and I used to live in the same school district. Neither of us competed in sports, but our schools used to play each other. She and I, being so far away from home, bonded us together like sisters, and we were inseparable after our first day together. Greta was 23, and she had long strawberry hair that she styled big for the times. While we worked there, our rooms were all on the property, like a second little motel. We were free to come and go as we pleased. Greta was in a pretty toxic on and off again relationship that remained that way the full 3 years I'd known her. He picked her up a couple of times from the brothel, but never got out of the car. I'd of course have to hear the stories of him breaking her heart, time after time, and I'd give advice like she'd take it seriously, and the cycle would repeat again. To maintain room and board, the girls had to sign a contract outlining their schedule. They could sign on for a week up to 6 months, but were expected to stay the whole time that they signed up for. Some girls would sign up for bi-weekly residences too. Again, we were very flexible, and we had a waiting list for potential workers. When Greta no-showed on a week that she'd signed up for, I wasn't concerned about the business. I was concerned because Greta was never flaky, and in those 3 years of me scheduling her, she'd always shown up. It was very out of character, and so I tried giving her a call, and it went straight to voicemail. I'd randomly punch in her number and try it multiple times throughout the week, hoping to hear it ring, hoping to hear her voice. I would have gladly taken any excuse she gave me, just to know that she was all right. But every time, it went straight to voicemail. This wasn't one of those jobs where we'd follow up or call the cops about a wellness check because a mailing address wasn't something that we required to apply because we gave them cash. I suspected her boyfriend had gone off the deep end, but with only his first name and a vague secondhand description of him, it felt silly to call the police. Later that week, though, her boyfriend would pull into the parking lot, and this time I'd get to see what he looked like in person. And though I now had a clear description of him, my suspicions of his involvement dissolved when I gathered that he was looking for Greta too. His name was Rajid. He walked through the front door and asked if I knew who Greta was, if anybody had heard from her recently. I told him I knew her, but nobody's received any sort of contact from her. Rajid thanked me, wrote down his number just in case she did come back, and then he departed. After that week had passed, Big Sam was tasked on cleaning out the rest of Greta's things from her room. As he's lifting up her mattress from the box frame, he saw the wood on the floor had some discoloration. So Sam lifts up the wooden frame and uncovers a decent-sized pentagram painted in red that was hidden under her bed. In her drawers, we found these tiny dolls carved out of wood. They were small enough to fit in your palm, and if you stared at them long enough, they all resembled somebody at the brothel. The details on them were incredible. Taking them into the light, we could see that they were all individually painted. Seeing the familiar features on these figurines had caught my eye, because there was one with blue and black hair. It looked just like the hairstyle of one of our residents. Big Sam wasn't too impressed. He went back to cleaning out the rest of Greta's stuff. But I stayed standing outside, looking at these creations, wondering if Greta had whittled them. If she did, she'd never mentioned having such a talent. Along with the multicolored hair one that was easy to pick out, I also found a little Big Sam figurine, a little me, and what I believe was Greta's character. She was one of 2 African-American women that worked there, and they had different body types. Greta's doll didn't look like the rest of them. The painted faces all of them wore were simple white circles and black pupils. No nose, no mouth. A few had blue pupils, but Greta had black circles with red pupils. I'm staring at this demonic-looking doll when Sam pops his head out of the door and asks me if I had the remote to the TV in there. I said no, and he gave me an interrogating hard stare before going back in. A second later, Sam's coming out of Greta's room again, but this time he's running out, arms wailing, like he's swatting a bee away from his ear. I go, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" Hand to God, Sam looked pale, shaken up big time. He says, "Look," and shows me his goosebump-filled arms and says, "Someone just whispered in my ear, Emma." Now I was giving the interrogation stare down, wondering if he was trying to prank me, but he swore intently that he wasn't. He said the TV in there kept turning on and off, so he got on his hands and knees, reaching behind her dresser to unplug it from the wall. And while he was down there, that's when he had not just heard, but felt the breath of someone whispering in his ear. I was sure a bug had just flown by his ear, but his temper jumped to aggravated as he told me that he'd know the difference. We paid Big Sam for his size, not his manners or people skills, so what do you do when your big security guard gets spooked? Well, I don't know, so I went into Greta's room myself. I think on the idea that I'd find a moth or another winged bug in there, and I'd be able to laugh in Sam's tattooed face, call him a baby. So I step inside, and it felt like Sam had the AC cranked all the way up before he'd ran out. But I went over to turn it off and noticed it already was. The unit wasn't cold. The chill in the room wasn't coming from there. I didn't stick around long enough to figure out where the source was coming from either. As I'm searching for a pest to blame, I inevitably look up. When I do, I see there's a message written on the ceiling above me. I'll always remember what it said, because I had to take a picture of it for our records and insurance purposes, as well as physically rewrite it on a ton of documents. in the same red paint that was used for the pentagram. Greta had written, "I'm still here," in big capital letters that stretched across the white ceiling. I got a tingle up my spine I couldn't ignore, and I made my way out almost as fast as Sam did. It would cost a couple $1,000s to get that room renovated enough for someone to live in it again, but even after, the girls that would stay in there would complain about weird things happening in that room, ranging from strange sounds to more than one claim of a full-on figure standing behind them when they're looking into the bathroom mirror. They'll usually ask to change rooms. A few times we didn't have extra rooms available, and the girls actually gave up their residency, packing their belongings and driving away that night. I couldn't make sense of it. The year Greta went missing was the same year I quit. I started to dread showing up to work. There was something about that place. It felt like it was attracting negative energy. The girls started changing, and I no longer thought of us as a band of rebels looking out for each other. A job's a job, though. And to say the camaraderie wasn't my end-all reason. I really hated how creeped out everyone got about Greta's old room. Nobody treated her disappearance as something to mourn over. Everyone just moved on, started treating Greta's door like little children would, daring each other to knock on the door at night, making a mockery of something truly tragic. I couldn't explain why she had those dolls or graffiti in her room, but everyone's apathy toward it made me sick, because she was a good friend to me. And wherever she is now, heaven, hell, or in between, I'll always wish the best for her. Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode. Thanks for joining me, whether it's your first time or you're a regular. Your support means the world over here. We've got brand new episodes every Friday night. Keep those eyes open for those deep sleep videos. And of course, subscribe, tap the bell, and you'll never miss a thing. Special thanks to the Darkest Hour channel members: Lori TESDAHL, Sarah Marie, Robert Bailey, COLTDADDY Eagle, Mallory Dominguez, KARI Watkins, PILAR TREDEN WIXSON, Larry Hill, RIPLEY, JOJO STARCHER, Mary Patrick, Debbie LAFRENIERE, Julie BOURDELAIS, Jennifer BECK, MARINA LACHNER, Make Hamilton Home, Evan Pratt, Mary Hineline, Katharine Yes.ImtherealKatie Isabelle, Landshark, Danielle Hecht, Mama P, Keziah Pietersen, Amber Baker, Khris Lauzon, Kara Geos, Marvin Allen, Forgotten Ruins TV, Ravenwolf, Carlos, Stacia Giletti, Nate Black, Jill Harper, Kathy Balkenbush, Cosmic Chick, Sierra Guerrero, Deanna Kuzma, Nathan Bremer, Demian Forrester. Big thanks to those who shared their stories, and a huge shout out to all of our patrons: Tracy S., Mary H., Tanya F., Tamara K., Monica L., Zoe Watt, Shelley B., Donald C., Marion T., Rat Girl, Alicia S., Aaron G., Nikki H., Mr. Revenant, Naz K., Brendan G., Paul T., Nicholas C., Tony P., Lizanne, Arlene F., Adrian, T.F. Parham, Jason G., Lori T., Bobo Jenkins, Rachel S., Linda W., Eric, and Lynn Driftless. If you out there want to support The Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining our Patreon or becoming a channel member. Check out patreon.com/thedarkesthour or click the link in the description to learn more. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, Amanda, darkesthour@gmail.com. or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. Stay spooky.